that's what we're constantly evangelizing as Americans: productivity, efficiency, independence. There's some natural fallouts for that. It's isolation, cynicism, and burnout. When we're just spinning our wheels and spinning our wheels and spinning our wheels. But there is a root cause for all of that, and it is that little P word, that pride. We think that if we don't hold the whole thing up, the whole thing's going to come crashing down. But listen, ladies, what we all as mothers in particular, because, we're the magic makers of the home, we're the wheel spinners, we're the detail people. What we all need to recognize, and this is hard to hear, but it is the honest truth. We are not everything. Only God is everything.
If figuring out what to feed your family feels exactly like a never-ending to-do list, I get it. That is exactly why I created these 3 cookbooks just for you. 1 Chicken, 5 Meals shows you how to stretch a single bird into a week of nourishing, no-stress dinners. Nourishing Junk Food lets you create your favorites with using real food ingredients, no food dyes, no seed oils, and no other junk, just the flavors that you love. And in betweens, that's the secret weapon for snack time, lunch boxes, and all those what do I even feed them right now moments. All 3 are kid-friendly, mama approved, and made for real life. Get your copies today and turn your kitchen into a place that you actually enjoy. Go to fornutrientsake.com and use the code MAM15 for 15% off your order.
Welcome to Modern Ancestral Mamas. We are Corey and Christine, 2 millennial moms on a mission to bring ancestral wisdom to modern motherhood. And today we're going to be deviating a little bit from our regular topic of nutrition and feeding kids to discuss homeschooling, reading to kids, and creating, I looked this up yesterday for how to pronounce it, hygge.
Well done.
Yes.
Okay, I have to tell this story. Wait, finish introducing Jamie. Sorry.
Okay. And creating hygge in the home. So if you're unsure of what that word even means, like I was, and you had to Google how to pronounce it, don't worry. We're going to define it in today's show. And so joining us today is Jamie Erickson of the Unlikely Homeschool blog. Welcome, Jamie.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. And well done with the pronunciation. That is quite a tongue twister word. So you did pretty well.
Okay, so this is my story about hygge. My sister is wonderful. I love her, and she's an absolute goofy goof. Okay, she was telling me about how she was trying to be more cozy in her home and embrace this new Danish philosophy that she'd heard about. And she was like, it's just, in the winter, you kind of feel sad. And if your house is really cozy, then you don't feel so sad. I'm like, okay, cool. What's this thing you've been researching? And she goes, well, it's kind of a weird word. And you pronounce it like this. I'm going to back up from my mic so I don't blow any speakers. She goes, you pronounce it hygge. And I'm like, Annie, what? She sounded like a cow. It's the funniest thing. Anyway, that was my first impression of this philosophy.
Hygge.
Yeah.
For the record, folks, it is spelled Hygge. So where hygge comes from, I have no idea.
Well, I'm sure Jamie can tell us.
Well,
yes,
there you go.
True.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So, let's start with, we usually start the show with a roundtable question. So we will do that and then we'll come back to what this word means. Okay. So today's question, we'll all take a turn answering, is what makes you feel welcome in somebody else's home? Anybody want to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
For me, it's what I call scruffy hospitality. The kind
Ooh.
of life that, I walk in your door and I see some shoes sloughed off by the door. I see maybe a few dishes in the sink, maybe a basket of clean but not folded laundry by the couch. You're showing me your real life. You haven't sterilized anything to impress me. And what I think of when I walk in and I see that is that, one, you trust me enough to show me your real self. Two, you're inviting me into your actual life, not the Pinterest or the Instagram version of it. And that you care enough about me to make me feel like family, even when I might not be. And so then that kind of gives me the courage to return the favor. And when you come over to my house, I feel less stressed about making sure it's sterilized and presentable. We're showing our real selves here, and that makes me feel welcome. When I feel like, I could be your sister or your, lifetime long friend, even if we've only met, I feel welcome.
I love that.
Yeah. I had never thought of any of those things before. I'm
Okay,
a neat freak, so that's hard for me to hear. Like, full transparency.
Okay, so I'll return the question back to you. When you walk into somebody's house and you see that as a neat freak, do you feel unwelcome? Or like
That's a
they
good
didn't
question.
give you any
Yeah.
thought to your visit?
No, I don't feel like if the house is not neat, it bothers me per se.
If it's somebody else's house?
If it's somebody else's house. But I do, like, for me, it's more about how are they welcoming me in personally, as far as like, what are they saying to me? Is the door being sort of half opened? Am I coming in? Is there something cooking actually? Like, for me, that's a really big deal. Like, if the house smells like food has been cooked in it, I like that personally. Or if there is something cooking. I was going to say something about the mess. What was it? Just that I know that every person is different and everyone has different backgrounds when it comes to how they keep up their home. So it's, and like some people have more kids, some people have less kids, and yeah. But for me in my own home, it's just like a sanity thing. Like oh my gosh, the mess, and we've talked about this with Sina McCullough, the mess makes me anxious.
Yeah. Well, it makes everybody anxious. Science has shown us that. Like,
Yeah.
everybody operates a little bit better at the corner of like clean and tidy and organized. That's just human nature. And I'm not talking about like living in squalor. I'm just meaning that you can walk into somebody's house and it looks like it's being lived in. And so they're welcoming you into their life because they're sharing what they're actually living. And I think there is a difference. And I understand. I mean, I like my house to be, I don't want to look like I live in a garbage heap. Nobody does. But I think sometimes when we think about that question and we flip the script a little bit, like, how do I feel when I walk into somebody's house that looks lived in? I don't feel uncomfortable. I don't feel neglected or forgotten. So if we can remember that as we're welcoming other people, sometimes I think we think too much about ourselves when we're welcoming somebody in. And really, this desire for like perfection and clean, if we're really being honest, often has an undergirding of you're thinking about yourself too much.
Ooh, that's really interesting. I thought of one more thing I was going to add, which is cozy couch, like pillows, like a couch that you feel like you can sit on.
I want to return to your two things later on in our conversation. You said smell and cozy couch. We're gonna revisit those two things.
All right, your turn.
I'll write them down. Okay, I was just gonna say, getting to somebody's house and either being given it depends on, I guess, how well I know the person, but given the agency to like make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or being offered one of those two things. and then like, here's a cup, come and sit with me, let's talk. And it's cool if our kids are, running and doing all the things kids do. Like now that I'm really thinking about it, that and having the kids not feel like a burden is huge to me. Having because I have kids that are teenagery down to my daughter just turned 5 yesterday, my youngest. And so obviously she's still in that, dump the Legos out and find the best ones stage. Actually, my 13-year-old's in that stage too. But, having that not be a freak out point in the host's countenance is huge.
I remember once when I have 5 kids, and when I think I had my third as a baby or something. So I had at least 3 kids under, let's say 3. And I was invited over to a friend's house. I'd never been to her house before. And it was like a scene from Better Homes and Gardens or like Magnolia Market or something. And it was such a nice, fancy house. I refused to go inside with my 3 children. I was like, can we just hang out here on the porch? It was like I was anxious about bringing the chaos of 3 kids under 3. And I knew I would not have a good time visiting with my friend because I would be constantly on high alert for what my children were doing or not doing. And I remember that every time I invite someone over, like, are they going to feel like they can walk into my house? And this isn't to slam against my friend. She just had a very nice house and I wanted to keep it that way. But I had a visceral bodily reaction to walking across her threshold with my 3 children. And so we just sat on the porch, and I didn't want to make a big deal about it. I just said, it's really nice weather. Let's just hang out here. The kids can play in the yard. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'm not bringing my chaos into your house.
Yeah. We had a white couch at one point.
How'd that go?
Well, so here's what happened. It was a free couch. All of my furniture at this point in my life was free off of like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or something, or, like under $100. So this was a free couch. It happened to fit where we needed it to be. And I had really little kids and I was like, I'm not buying a nice couch. So it was white, but it was white just because of that. Like it was not like a nice white couch. And we had some brand new friends come over and they had a 2-year-old. We also had a 2-year-old. Okay. But they had a 2-year-old boy and we had a 2-year-old girl.
Quite a difference.
Yeah, quite a difference. And their 2-year-old son started drawing on the back of the couch because it looks like a beautiful piece of paper, canvas.
Piece of paper.
Yeah,
Oh,
beautiful.
Yes. Yeah.
With markers. And his dad starts freaking out. I'm like, hey, it's okay. Like, first of all, it's a free couch. Not a problem. Second of all, this is why I literally pay more money to only buy washable markers. Because like this will happen. And I don't know if it like made him feel better. He still like wanted to clean off the couch, which is fine. But that's the kind of thing that makes me feel better. I'm like, okay, you only buy washable markers because you know your children are going to draw on something. And even if you buy a white couch, it's not a big deal. Okay. So Jamie, would you tell us really quickly how many kids you have and how old they are?
Yeah, I have 5 kids, like I said. My oldest is 21. She is starting her senior year this fall out at a university on the West Coast. I have an eldest son serving the military in some kind of highly dangerous capacities. He just got engaged, so that's exciting. I will have a senior in high school, a junior in high school, and then our last born is 13, and he'll be rounding out middle school in the coming school year.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's like an 8-year spread between all 5 of them.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Man, I have so much respect for those women who have gotten through that many stages of child rearing.
Mm-hmm. Everyone is fantastic. Every single season. has been glorious.
Oh,
I hope I can say that at that
I know.
point.
Same. I'm like, right now, I feel like I can't say anything about middle school or high school or young
Oh,
adulthood.
hindsight is wonderful, though. It is.
Okay.
Okay, so you wrote this book, Holy Hygge. It came out when? A few years ago, right?
2022, I think.
Okay. I hosted a book club with my homeschool co-op moms.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad.
And I went to find it on my shelf this morning and I couldn't find it because I think I've lent it out. So, and it hasn't come back in. So I guess I'm gonna have to buy another copy. But I would love it if you would give us kind of a background on what that term means and like why you decided to write this book, because your other book is, you have another book on homeschooling.
Mhm.
So this is not like a homeschooling book.
No.
Right. So how did you get to the point of feeling like you needed to write this? And also please define what hygge means.
Okay. Well, hygge is a Danish lifestyle concept. We actually don't have a word in English that is a direct translation. So we can kind of give a summary for what hygge is, but we don't have a word for word here in English. It is a lifestyle that kind of engenders feelings of coziness, and it uses many different elements. I've sort of distilled it down to like the top 7 things that you see in a hygge lifestyle, but I'm in no way saying this is like the definitive definition of it. These are just the 7 practices that, across the board you generally see in a hygge home. And the 7 are hospitality, relationships, well-being, atmosphere, comfort, contentment, and rest. And I will be 100% candid in saying I'm not Danish, but my husband is. He is half Danish and half Norwegian. I am from Phoenix, Arizona, grew up in a huge big city in a metro, blazing sun. I think currently right now the weather in Phoenix is like 108 or some ridiculous number. And then I fell in love, as one does, and married this man who lived in central Minnesota. And if you know anything about geography, Minnesota boasts the largest number of Scandinavian Americans in the country, including my husband's Danish and Norwegian relations. And so when we got married, I moved up here, and it was a very stark contrast. And obviously the weather is like the biggest thing you think of. I went from like triple digits for 90% of the year and negative numbers for the negative numbers 90% of the year. But the weather wasn't the only thing. The culture is vastly different. And it's really hard to put a finger on the pulse of that, except to say that, I moved up here and instantly I bristled. Like, it's freezing. It's dark all the time. I have to wear every single thing I own in my closet all the live long day. How do these people have a smile on their face? But yet they did. And they learned in these really biting, bitter environments to be content and cozy and not just survive, but really thrive in this area, in this place. And I'm not really just talking about geography and temperature here, but even just life stages. I saw my husband's friends and family walk through really, really hard times and what I would call like a winter season of life. And they didn't begrudge that. It's not like they were cheering about it, but they embraced it for what it was and how it would lead them to the next stage of spring in their life. You can't very well have those spring, summer, and like the harvest season where there's bounty galore. You can't have any of those seasons without also having a winter where life is dormant and fallow and there's deep things growing underneath. And I saw that play out, not just in geography, not just agriculture, but like in life. And it was very compelling to me. And I am a woman of faith, and I saw that even friends and family who were not people of faith had this sort of what Jesus would call abundant life. And I then after digging deeper, learned to associate that with this lifestyle concept of hygge that they had kind of cocooned themselves with. And I began to see comparisons between my faith and this lifestyle. And really, it was that this lifestyle, in my mind, mirrored the things that I already knew of in my faith.
Mm. You look like you're going to say something.
No, I was going to say that's so interesting. Can you go a little bit into the 7 characteristics that you mentioned?
Well, are there any in particular that are compelling? I feel like we're all kind of some of them naturally come easy to us. They will naturally be more naturally easy to you, and some you will struggle with. And I feel like the thing that like kind of makes when you hear the word, you kind of bristle or you get a little tense. That's the area that you've really struggled with and probably could use more of in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So were there any that kind of made you sit up a little straighter and
okay, repeat them one more time.
Hospitality,
okay,
relationships, well-being, atmosphere, comfort, contentment, and rest. And I think the thing that we naturally do, or that comes more naturally to us, will usually make us like lift and exhale, because that feels like home to us. That feels like sanctuary, abundant living to us. It's the thing that makes us bristle when we even hear the word. That is probably the one we need to lean in and pay more attention to if we're trying to nurture a hygge lifestyle.
I mean, for me personally, I actually think it's rest, because I know I don't get enough of that in my daily life. And both Corey and I have interviewed previous guests, one in particular who has talked about the importance of rest specifically for women.
That's the one I was going to say is my struggle point too. Definitely rest.
Okay.
And I have some questions that I wanted to get to on that topic specifically. Do we want to jump to those?
Sure. Do it.
Okay. Rest, I think, is so difficult, particularly for homeschooling moms, but I don't actually think that's true. I think particularly for any mom, right? Because if you're working, and then you come home and you're doing the mom thing. And then, on the weekends you have football and dance and whatever. I think it's a modern thing. I think it's very difficult as a modern American person to find meaningful rest. And I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who said, like, Corey, you need to develop a Sabbath habit, right? And for me, that seems almost impossible. like, yes, I can go to church on Sunday. I carve out that 2 hours to go to church. And then when I come home, I'm doing chores, or I'm, fixing the chicken coop or whatever. Because, I homeschool the kids full time. My husband works full time. So our weekends are when we get to do farm chores. So having a full day of rest seems totally luxurious.
Okay.
What are your thoughts, Jamie?
I have many thoughts. Are you ready for me to unload?
Please give me all the things.
Okay. First of all, I want to push back on the idea. You used the word modern American culture. I think that's a really easy default because we are so myopic in our line of sight for history. Like we only think about the past like 20, 30 years because that's our lived experience, right? But I would say it's not a modern American cultural thing. It's an American cultural thing. I think as a people, as a culture, we are independent, we are productive, and we are efficient. Like that's what Americans are typically known for. None of those things are necessarily bad in and of themselves, but
right, like that would be a pride point, right?
Right. Yes. The natural, and we're going to get to that word too. Hold on to your hats. The natural fallout for that, what I would call like the try hard American gospel, and I use a small g, like that's what we're constantly evangelizing as Americans: productivity, efficiency, independence. there's some natural fallouts for that. It's isolation, cynicism, and burnout. When we're just spinning our wheels and spinning our wheels and spinning our wheels. But there is a root cause for all of that, and it is that little P word, that pride. We think that if we don't hold the whole thing up, the whole thing's going to come crashing down. But listen, ladies, what we all as mothers in particular, because, you know, we're the magic makers of the home, we're the wheel spinners, we're the detail people. What we all need to recognize, and this is hard to hear, but it is the honest truth. We are not everything. Only God is everything. And in trying to be all things for all people all the time and ignoring the very clear command in Scripture to rest, and even if you're not a person of faith, I would argue science shows us that, and actually the Danish people in their real need and demand for rest show us that you actually are more productive after you have rest, and you are more able to be fully present when you are not, you know, running on empty and 3% battery of your life. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's get back to the scriptural mandate of Sabbath rest. When we refuse in our productivity to rest and we keep spinning our wheels, what we're actually saying, we're inadvertently saying, is we can be all things to all people. So what then are we really saying? That we can't just be like God, we can be God. We might not be saying it with our words, but we certainly are saying it with our actions.
Okay. So what does rest look like as people who are, you know, required to still keep our children fed? And yeah, that's a big one. Yeah. What does it look like? Go ahead, Christine.
This is just a funny anecdote, but my oven has a Sabbath mode.
What?
I love it.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I've never used it.
Oh.
Continue, Jamie. Maybe I need to figure out a way to use it.
I think that's a little science experiment that needs to happen this afternoon. Just test it out.
Oh, wow.
And I think of the elevators in New York City that also have Sabbath mode.
Yeah, for the Orthodox Jews that live there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to your question, I think the minute you start trying to define what rest can be, you've missed the point of it altogether. Like, you've made it a legalistic tenet. And rest is going to look different for different people and in different seasons. So I have a friend who loves to garden, and for her, that is very restful. She's in tune with nature. She can commune with God. She can just breathe, you know, clean air and get her hands dirty in the dirt, doing something that is restorative to her. Gardening feels like a community service to me. Like, there is nothing restful about it at all. So I wouldn't, you know, stack gardening in my pile of, oh, this is what I'm going to do for Sabbath rest. I think we have to, first of all, define what rest is, or maybe it would be easier to say what it is not. Rest is not just relaxation. Rest is not just a pause of action. Rest is actually intentional restoration. And it's, again, going to look different for different women and in different seasons. What I found restful and restorative when I had, you know, 4 babies under 5, that was probably my physically busiest season of my life, was a nap.
Yeah.
And now today, I don't need a nap quite so much, you know. So you have to think about the season that you're in, season of life. I also want us to think about the fact that Sabbath rest is Sabbath rest is you're not working, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not caring. And there's a difference. Like, if you have a baby who's in diapers, you can't just necessarily say, oh, I'm sorry, you had a blowout. Well, I'm doing Sabbath rest. That'll have to happen, you know, tomorrow. I'll change your diaper tomorrow. when God instituted this idea of Sabbath rest, it was a pause of work. It wasn't a pause of care. He was still caring for the world. He was still upholding it, making it turn, making it run. He was still caring for his creation. He just wasn't working. And there's a difference. So I think sometimes moms get a little disgruntled, a little bitter because, oh, well, I don't have the time to not make a meal. I don't have the time to not change a diaper.
Mhm.
Those things are care. They're not work. I also think, and this might sting a little bit, but here's some truth. In order to rest well, you also have to work well, which means you cannot pack your other 6 days so full of things that they then spill over into your day that you've set aside for rest. So during those 6 days of work, whatever that looks like to you, you need to be bold enough to say no to some things in order that you have buffers in those days for, the inevitable chaos that will happen with being a mom and having a home and working and running a life, so that you have some buffers in your time so that they don't spill over to your rest time. So Sabbath rest actually, and scripturally this is true, takes a little bit of work on those other 6 days in order to rest well on the 7th day.
I like how you made that distinction between care and work. I think that that's really important to be able to understand how we can implement rest on the Sabbath.
Yeah. And if you don't recognize the difference, that's where the bitterness seeps in. And that's where you lose all joy of being a mother, because then your children become an occupational hazard. And the care of keeping them on your day of rest begins to niggle at you, and you point that frustration at them.
Wow. That's a really, really important distinction.
Yeah.
Oof.
That's a hard one to swallow.
Sorry, girls.
No, please bring it.
I know.
Like,
I'm loving this so far.
Okay. I love this conversation of kind of being counterculture to what we are used to in our American ways. I think there's a lot of what Christine and I talk about that is intentionally counterculture when it comes to how we're raising our kids, how we're schooling our kids, how we're feeding our kids. And this is more along the lines of how we're kind of structuring our home and how we're structuring our hearts. And I think this is really important. So, can
I just pause there and interrupt for 1 second to say,
yeah, please.
I hear your heart, and I imagine that your listeners are very intentional mothers. They choose what they're feeding their children. They choose what products they're introducing into their home. There's a lot of intentionality that I'm hearing. You have to use that same intentionality to rest. Like, one is not more important than the other.
Okay.
I mean, I just keep thinking back to Mary Ruddock and how she talks about how important it is for our hormones, and also what I'm hearing you say is we need to model this for our children.
100%.
And if we're not modeling this for our children, then they're going to grow into adults that are constantly, performing with no time for intentional rest. And this makes me reflect back on my own childhood. I don't think I ever saw my mother rest.
Yeah, I was going to say that. About a year ago, I was thinking on that specific thing about how I don't think I ever saw my mom really sit and read a book. Like, I know she read a lot, but it was always after we had gone to bed, So I know she was making sure that she had that quiet resting time, but it was always after we were in bed and I never saw it. And this is I don't remember if it was a conversation I had with my sister or who I was talking with, but I was like, I really, really, really want my kids to see me not doing something, or like sitting intentionally and reading a book. So I started doing that, and it's not easy, because I have a little one who wants to talk to me or show me a new dance or something. And like today, they did this dance for me while I was drinking my coffee this morning, where they threw confetti everywhere. I was like, oh boy, this is so beautiful. Anyway, so about a year ago, I started making sure that I sat down maybe once a week and read a chapter of whatever book I was reading on the couch in front of my kids at like 3:00 in the afternoon. And it's been crazy because it's kind of shifted our whole family reading culture. Like my family reads a lot. We're a homeschool family. Like we read a lot. But that like kick-started some thing in our household where now my husband will sit and read after work instead of turning on the TV. Like I've gotten through multiple chapter books where maybe for the first half of my motherhood journey, I had read 2 books over like the course of 8-9 years, and it's just been so wonderful to have that intentionality around showing them that I can just take, 10 minutes to just read a chapter. Now, that's not a full day of rest, but it is a little bit of something.
Mm-hmm. I think we diminish the importance of these soft skills that we want to teach our kids. And I will tell you, because I have a young adult daughter, how I've seen that play, this idea of like our hustle culture and our constantly spinning our wheels, this American culture that we built, how I've seen it play out in her own life differently than those of her friends, because her whole life she has had that modeled for her, and there has been intentional space in our home and in our schedule for not just restorative rest, but, going back to your thought on homeschooling, like, this is a bit of a side tangent. Homeschool moms have these really big, grand proclamations that we make about education and about learning. One of them being we're lifelong learners, or
Right.
reading is important and it's a foundational skill for life. And we make these big, bold proclamations, forgetting the fact that we're still lifelong learners too. And the example has to start with us.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if it doesn't, we're just giving lip service to the things that we find important, but we're not actually living them out. And more is going to be caught than taught in our homes. Our kids will see that our words and our actions do not align, and they're going to model the actions more than the words. And so if you are a homeschool mom and you're declaring, the importance of reading, you're trying to nurture a reading culture in your home, and you see the value of that, and yet you're not reading for the sheer pleasure of reading. Like you're not reading because you're in some sort of book club. You're not reading because you're trying to learn this new skill. You're just reading because it is a delight to read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're just giving lip service to what you say is important.
Okay, so talk to us about, because you mentioned making space for that in your schedule and in your homeschool life with your kids. Tell us how you did that.
One easy trick is, as a homeschool mom, you typically make a schedule for things that are important, right? There's a line item in the day, a time where you do math or, fill in the blank, right? Yes. Math is the mustache twirling villain in my life. Yeah. 100%. I felt that deeply.
Yeah.
But I find it important. I want my kids to have a general knowledge and a working knowledge of math. So there's a line item in our day for math. There also has to be a line item in our day for pleasure reading. And so what our schedule has, probably for the last 17 years of homeschooling, There are two things that I have determined are the most important things for homeschooling. And I, with the very, all my gumption and everything I've got, if I can get those two things done in the day and everything else kind of circles the drain and like it's a dumpster fire, I will still count the day as a success because I got to the two most important things. And one of those two things is pleasure reading. And so after we have like our family devotional time in the morning, I set a timer for 15 minutes and everybody grabs whatever book they happen to be reading for pleasure. And we all, including myself, sit and read for 15 minutes to start the day off with the very best foot. And so then if nothing else in the day gets done, but we have done some pleasure reading and we've had some faith formation, I count that as in the win column.
I love this. Can you tell me how I can do this with children who are not readers yet?
Yeah,
I can't read.
I had a basket of books. I went to the library every single week, and I didn't always bring my children. I want to say that on the outset. Oftentimes, I would just request books online or just go in and grab books. But I always had a basket of library books that circulated out every week, so they were nice and fresh.
They were different,
and they sat next to me. And if you could not read, you sat and you turned pages. And you looked at books. We also had an understanding, obviously it's a little bit trickier and harder to do anything the first time with the first child. There's kind of setting the tone. But then as other children come down the pike and are now like folded in and grafted into the school day, they're just following the example. And so it's a little bit easier with the other ones because the culture and the tone of your home has already kind of been set. And so those younger kids, as they, were 2, maybe 3 years old, even as young as 18 months, I'd say, they just knew that they were going to be opening books and looking at pages. And then I also had to have some discussions with my older kids about the fact that their attention span is not as long as yours. And so if they start out looking at a picture book, but then they wander over to grab, a set of blocks or something, that's okay. We're not going to make a big deal about it. I might redirect them back to the books, but I don't want it to become anarchy, and I don't want my reading time to be wasted or ill spent. I also don't want it to become a power struggle to where reading suddenly has this undertone of like mom's harsh words and like, finger wagging. So it is a balance, but if you start that out when they are still like toddling around, that tone is set and will carry them through. And so we still, now 17 years later, do that every single morning.
Oh my gosh, I'm totally taking notes. I love this. Corey, for the younger kids who can't read yet, I'm sure your library has it, but my library has books that are, I guess, audiobooks where they read the story to the kids and like tell them when to turn the page. And there's a little jack for
you can get like a Yoda player,
or a Yoda, of course.
Yeah, I'm showing my age, but like back when my older kids were young, we literally had like books on CD, and they'd hear the little chime and they'd turn the page. Yes, do what you got to do, but I would say if you start early and it's a non-negotiable in the day, just as much as like math or history or science, it doesn't become a power struggle as they get older. It's just the next thing that you do in the day.
I love that.
I know. I'm already thinking of my own day because I like how you're starting your day that way. And I'm thinking, I actually want something like that in the afternoon for my day. Like I want there to be like a little bit of a quiet time.
Yeah.
Right before dinner, kind of like, the in-between time between, I don't know, the afternoon and dinner and bedtime and all that stuff.
Sort of an afternoon reset. We kind of do that with our read aloud, because after lunch, I've always read aloud to my children.
Okay.
And so that's kind of like another reset, but that's not necessarily me mirroring to them what it looks like to be a lifelong reader. I think that there are other times in the day, obviously more now in this season of life that I am in versus in the early years, in the sort of mom heavy years of mothering. But now I do have larger swaths of time in the evening, even before I go to bed, before they're in bed. Let's face it, my teenagers stay up way past me. but they see me reading because I always read right before I go to bed. And there's other times, am I intentional to grab a book and throw it in my purse on my way out the door? Well, that's a habit that I've formed, and I'm mimicking that to them. I'm encouraging them to do that as well. There are habits that we can build into our lives that will overflow to our children to make them these lifetime readers, if that's our intent and our purpose.
I heard Sarah Jessica Parker say that their family culture from her house growing up was to always have a book with you.
Yes.
It's like, ooh, I love that.
Because there's always fringe moments in the day, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, where instead of taking out your phone and scrolling, are you showing them a different path?
Yeah, that's cool. I always have a book in my car that I just keep in my car. And it's actually, I've had one there for a really long time because the point of it was that whenever my kid would fall asleep in the car seat, then I would open the door to the other kids. They could go run around and play in the yard, and I would sit in the car and read while the baby was sleeping. Mm-hmm. So I literally have a book in my car that I'm halfway through that has been there for the past, since my youngest stopped taking naps in the car, so probably 4 years.
Still counts.
I haven't finished it yet.
Still counts. They'll still see you pick it up here and there in the little nooks and crannies of your day. Totally counts.
Yeah, I love it.
All right, our second code that we're going to share with you is from Seatopia. The code that they have given us is Ancestral Mama, and that's going to get you 10% off. They sell sushi grade and snap frozen fish. So it's frozen at the peak of freshness, and it's all clean, certified clean seafood that is mercury safe and microplastic tested. Check out their website, seatopia.com. Is that right?
It's seatopiafish.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to shift. Can we shift to talking, because I think this is a really big one, and I think we've already sort of hit on it a little bit, but let's shift to talking about hospitality and the creating community and being intentional with that. So what is hospitality, and what does it look like in our culture, and how would you change that, or what do you suggest that we do with that?
Okay, I guess I want to enter through the back door and explain what hospitality is not, if I can, because I think that will give us a better understanding. Our American version of what hospitality is really what I would define as entertaining, and the two are not synonymous.
Okay.
Entertaining takes a posture of me, myself. What can I do to, or what can I make to serve my guests? What can I do to make my house look nice? What can I do to put a nice tablescape together? It's more about impressing and less about making the other person feel seen and known and welcomed. Hospitality, on the other hand, is the opposite of that. It flips the script and says, what can I make that would make this person feel welcome? Do they have any food allergies or any preferences? How can I present my home in a way that invites them in and makes them feel seen and known? It's less about a posture of performing and impressing, and more about a posture of welcoming. And I think in our American culture, often when we think of hospitality, what we really see in our mind's eye is entertaining, and it's not the same thing.
I just have to pause for a second and say that I live in Dallas, Texas. And if you have ever been to Dallas, Texas, you literally just described the classic Dallas mom.
Yeah.
1000%. Yes, they're very sweet. Yes, they're very Southern. Yes, they're very welcoming. But everything is being done to impress you. And
that's how it is in Georgia too.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it is all about I don't know, where you live, or your hairstylist, or your clothes, or where you bought your food, or what, that is literally, I don't really live in Dallas proper. I'm sort of out of that, and I've always been out of that. But I'm acutely aware that I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, and I see in your body language this ick factor, for lack of a better way to say that. And if you feel that way about being invited into other people's homes, then you have to ask yourself, how can I counter that so that people don't have that ick face when they come into my home? And it does take some courage to say, okay, I'll be the one to go first. But if you are courageous enough to say, I'll send that invitation, I will present my home again, with scruffy hospitality, to use that word again, you are setting a culture for the people around you, and that will have a rippling effect. Other people will say, oh, okay, I can do that too. And more invitations will be sent, because if we have this really high standard and we've set the bar so high for what it has to look like in order to invite people over, we really do it quite infrequently. And therefore, we're not really creating community. We're creating like one and done events. Here's a simple little like breadcrumb to lead you from, the Dallas way to this other way. Okay. Is think about like one special thing that you can leave your guest thinking about or feeling when they leave. It doesn't require you to, bend yourself backwards and tie yourself in knots. It's just one thing. So it might be one special drink that you're going to serve, one pretty thing that you're going to set out on the table. So you are being a little intentional, but you're not wearing yourself slap out. And it's that one thing that they will remember as they leave your home, and they'll continue to cycle back to that one memory. You're still having intentionality, which is sort of a Dallas-y way, we'll say, but you're doing it in a way that actually fits your real life, and hopefully we'll be doing it more often.
Okay, but let's say you're having somebody over that you've never had over for the first time, or somebody that you don't know that well.
Yeah.
How would you know what they like to think about them and to, offer them?
And you might not be able to answer that question, like specifically what they would like, without actually just asking. Like, do you have any food preferences, any allergies? That's a simple ask. And actually people aren't going to be offended by that because that does show some forethought in your thinking of them. But as far as like that one thing, if they have kids, fill up the backyard blow up swimming pool and set out some floaties. And that's the one thing they're going to remember. And they're not going to be sitting on your porch saying, I don't want to go inside, wrecking up your house, like I was. You're creating an atmosphere that is appropriate for the people that are coming over. And let's get back to that word, because you mentioned at the outset, you feel welcome when you smell good food cooking and when there's a comfy couch. And I think that's another key element that we often miss when we're trying to define hospitality, but what we're really thinking of it is entertainment. Because entertainment focuses on the outward visual aesthetics. It has to be pretty. But I don't know about you, I have walked into many a home that look like they've come out of the pages of House Beautiful, and yet you feel unwelcome. You feel a little
like
uptight, bristly. You don't want to, you find yourself sitting on the edge of the couch because you don't want to lean back into it and rough it up. That's not a welcoming feeling either. And yet the space is pretty, right? And I think the difference between entertaining and hospitality is hospitality creates an atmosphere, and it really incorporates all 5 senses in order to do that. So instead of just focusing on what it looks like, you're focusing on the smells. Are they appropriate for the occasion? In the fall, I'm cooking warm, hearty soups and chilies and baking bread in my oven. And the moment you walk into my house, it smells like fall. I might not have a single pumpkin sitting out on my table, but it's fall, right? Like I didn't need the sign over my door, harvest is here. It's fall by coming in. I have maybe a Spotify playlist with some fun songs that are inviting. I've focused on some smells, like maybe I've taken out the trash so the dirty diapers aren't the first thing that hits your nose when you walk through my door. Maybe I've put on a diffuser of some flowery scents because it's summer. These are all things, even the sounds that you hear when you walk through the door can create an atmosphere. When you are creating hospitality, I want you to think about like your favorite restaurant. When you go to your favorite restaurant, it's not usually just because the food is great, right? You like the atmosphere because maybe the waitresses are really kind. The servers are really kind. Maybe they do have some fun themed things around the walls. The music is hip and fun. It doesn't smell like a garbage heap in there. So you think of the atmosphere of a restaurant. Restaurants incorporate all 5 senses, or at least really good restaurants do. That's what you're trying to kind of create in your home. And when we focus so much on the aesthetics of the visual, that's where we default to entertaining.
Oh my gosh, I love this. This is such a cool conversation.
Okay, let's talk then about the community aspect. Because I think that it is so easy to get so, wrapped up in our own worlds and what we're doing in our schedules and all of this that that we kind of fail to create community or find community. And we feel like we're a burden, right? Like I remember we had a long time ago, our pastor gave a sermon on community, and he said, if you don't allow your friends to take you to the airport or do something for you, you're actually removing the opportunity for them to serve you, and you're taking something away from them instead of like allowing them to have this moment of community with you. You are sterilizing it by getting an Uber. So like, but it feels like a burden, you don't want, like, I don't even want to ask my mom to take me to the airport because I know my mom, is working or whatever. So how do we kind of, again, this is probably a cultural thing, but like, how do we step back from our hyper individualized and independent culture and lean into community and create community and be community,
even if there are no family members nearby, for the listeners that might be living like that.
Yeah, it is a give and take. I want to step back and just give you a little disclaimer about my life, and then I will answer that question. So growing up, I moved every single year of my life until I was about 18. We were never in the same neighborhood. I became very accustomed to being the newbie and what that means. And a lot of people can look at that and think, oh, that's a horrible childhood. And I won't say that it was great. I didn't always enjoy it. But what that pain point in my life did was make me have a deep empathy for people without community. And so everything I'm going to share is an overflow of that experience. And hear me, mama, who's listening. Sometimes we want to take away every pain point in our child's life. We want to completely sterilize every hard thing out of their life. But it is in those hard things that they will be formed. And that hard part of my childhood of never being in the same place for over a year, sometimes we moved twice in the same year, and having to meet and re-meet tons of people have made me just so passionate about hospitality because I wanted to feel welcomed. I wanted to feel seen. So from that, skipping ahead a little bit, 6 years ago, my husband and I moved from a community that we had been living in for about 15, 16 years to a brand new city where we knew 0 people. And we were like, our closest relations were 2 hours away. So certainly not close enough to just pop over for dinner. So we felt very alone. But as we were coming to this community, I told my children, I want all of us to start praying that we would be the person that someone else has been praying for. Not that we would find our friends, but that we would be a friend that someone has been waiting for. Do you see the difference between those two scripts? We've made it less about ourselves. And so right away, when we came, our desire was to get plugged in. We moved into this town on a Friday. By Tuesday morning, we were in some sort of community Bible study. And it does take intentionality. You have to be the one to say, even if you're an introvert, you have to say, for a short season, for a time, I'm going to plug in and do the work and be the one to make the invitation. So as we began to plug into things that maybe we knew weren't going to stick forever and for always, like we're not a part of that community Bible study anymore. It lasted for a short season, but we began to send invitations. So we might have just met you yesterday, but I was already saying, hey, would you like to come over and have some coffee? And I did that like twice a week. We had people over. And eventually, a small little circle began to form. And here's the thing. Community is going to have many, many layers. Think of it as concentric circles. Our bodies and our minds, our relationships can only handle really deep relationships in small amounts, like 3 to 5 people. Like think of the people in your life who've seen you in a bathing suit. Those are your core people, right? You probably can only handle 3 to 5 of those to do that well. Because so much of deep relationships just is logging hours, just investing time and energy. You can probably only do that with 3, maybe 4 or 5 people, right? And then the next layer are those like acquaintances that you might have over. They might be on the list if you're having a big bonfire in your backyard. They might be on that list, but they're not going to just pop over on a Tuesday for, queso dip and chips to shoot the breeze, right? So I think to your question, to build community, one, you have to be intentional to send an invite. Be brave enough to send it, even if you hear several no's. Like if you start to hear several no's from people, just turn around and ask the next person in line. Like don't let that be afraid, or don't let that fear you into not sending the invitation. And also remember that if you feel lonely, if you feel like you need community, other people do too. Like we know that 3 out of 5 Americans, and this is a pre-COVID statistic, I can only imagine what it is now, but 3 out of 5 Americans before COVID felt like they could not even name one person in their life that they would call a dear friend. That is so deeply sad. And so if 3 out of 5 Americans feel that, you just need to be brave enough to say, hey, I'll be your person. And you will never lack for community.
Wow.
I think the other thing too is you have to acknowledge that in different circles, your relationships will be different. It's okay to say that the people I sit next to on the bleachers for baseball, 3 out of 3 or 4 nights a week, they're not my best friends, but they're friends and I can call them that, and they can have different relational capital in my life than, say, my best friend who has seen me in a bathing suit. I think often we diminish and dismiss certain relationships like work level friends or church Bible study friends, or we put them in categories and think that they're not really my friends. That's not really my community because that's where I work or that's where we go play baseball. It's okay to see different groups of people in your life and value them for what they are and what they do bring to your life and what you bring to their life.
Gosh, I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
I know I probably have, aside from my husband, 3 or 4 people who I would call and, say, here's the big thing that's happening.
And what an honor it is, I bet, for them. I completely agree with whoever said that to you in your life, that in never ever, in always meeting needs, but never being needy, you are not allowing someone to give you love in the same way that you want to give love to others. You are closing that door. And hygge, getting back to hygge, is a give and take. You not only need to nurture hygge for others, but also for yourself. And sometimes that means raising your hand and saying, I need something. And allowing somebody to meet that need.
Yeah. I do think it's so hard, though. I think it's hard to be, because that's a vulnerability, right? Like being able to say, I need something from somebody who.
Okay, so flip the dialogue. The last time that you did something to meet the need of someone else, maybe it was bringing a meal over to a new mother who just had a baby, or picking up somebody's kids when they were late getting off work and you had to, pick them up from dance or whatever. How did that make you feel? Did it feel like a burden?
No, of course not.
No. It probably felt like, oh, I was able to bless her. Now, sometimes, if we're being honest, it's not always convenient. And sometimes it can shift into the burden side if we have made our lives so busy and full that we don't have the capacity and the time buffer to help. Sally Clarkson says something like people have needs at the most inconvenient times. and I would agree with that statement for the most part. But if I have orchestrated my life in such a way that I have, at least 20% buffer in my day to where outside of my control circumstances or needs that arise do not become a burden, then I can be fully able and present to be able to minister to or to help alleviate some of the burden of others. And that does bring me joy to know that I have helped in that way. Why would I want to deny somebody else the same joy? It is humbling, but sometimes that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And as women, we are meant to receive.
Yes.
So I do
agree.
think it's a good practice for us every once in a while to receive when someone is offering help or whatever it is.
And I just want to return to my faith, and I don't want to make this a scriptural message, but I will share one quick story if I may. Mm-hmm. Last fall, my son, who's in the military, became an incident happened while he was in the military. He became gravely ill to the point of they needed next of kin to come to the hospital. He was going to die. And my husband and I, we still had 3 kids at home, states away from where our son was in a military hospital, and had to pivot really quickly to get there. And because we had poured into our community for the last 6 years, it was nothing for them to turn around and do the same for us. Like, that was just innate in them. Of course they would come and help. And so they helped us rally, get us to where my son was, helped care for my kids until extended family could come and take care of them. We were with my son for about over a week, and he did fully recover. So that's the best part of the story. But in the meantime, things were happening here at home that we had no idea about. About 2 weeks prior to my son getting sick, my husband and I had shared with some friends about the fact that this summer we were going to have to remodel our deck and what a burden that was going to be on our finances. And just we're not really what you'd call handy folk. And so that is not our gifting. And we were not looking forward to it, least of all my husband. And we were just sharing that with some close family friends and how that was going to be on the docket for the summer. And then my son got sick. We went to the military hospital with him. We came home about a week later. We pulled up to our driveway and we looked across, and what did we see? A brand new deck that our friends had come and built anonymously. And we still don't to this day know exactly who it was, but our neighbors saw that happening every single day for a week. And when we pulled up to our driveway, they were out with cameras wanting to see our reaction. And they had tears in their eyes. These are not neighbors who have any sort of, at least by their own admission, any sort of faith. But it reminds me of a verse in scripture that they will know you by your love. Like the watching and waiting world will know you, will know Christ better because of the way we love each other and we commune together. And seeing how our friends had poured so much of their finances, their time, their energy, their talents into this simple act of rebuilding a deck because they knew we were not going to have it in us to come back home and rebuild a deck. How compelling and striking that was. to all of our neighbors. But it started with just simple acts of give and take. Like that was the culture we had built in our community, that if you have a need, sure, I can meet that need. And then now I have a need and you can turn around and meet it. And it is a give and take, but it extends beyond us when others around us see us communing so well together.
Mm.
What a beautiful story. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Can talk to us about some simple, tangible ways that mothers can begin to create more peaceful, cozy, and connected environment, even with screaming children, having to feed them 3 times a day, homeschool, all of that. Like, give us some practical steps for what this can look like.
I think it goes back to the 5 senses, creating this atmosphere of peace. Whenever I feel like my home is becoming chaotic and I feel that sense of anxiousness that creeps up when things are not running smoothly. And let's face it, that happens often because we're all imperfect people living together. I can resort to a couple quick tweaks to the moment that sort of recalibrates the day. And it's sometimes just as simple as, okay, we are going to take 5 minutes and do a quick reset of our communal spaces, like just do a quick 5-minute tidy, because again, sometimes it's just like physical chaos and clutter that's creeping in that makes you feel that sense of anxiousness. And anytime we have clutter of spaces, we often have clutter of minds and hearts and attitudes. So just a simple 5-minute tidy. Sometimes I put on some cello music or some worship music in the background to just set a very quiet tone. It's not loud. It's just kind of hovering in the background of the day. It is often, it's let's gather around and read a quick book together, a chapter of a book, to gather, to capture them, and then reset. It doesn't have to be anything big. One of the main mantras of a hygge lifestyle is that the outward life will always affect the inward life. Always. And if you have a cluttered environment, you are going to naturally feel internally cluttered. So oftentimes it's just, if you can just make a quick, small little reset into your atmosphere, it will really reorient your day, your life, your feelings about it all.
What about the mom who feels like she's in a perpetual state of chaos? Not just we've had a meltdown, from the 3-year-old, and the 6-year-old is ripping up paper to make confetti. It's not just that. It's the mom who feels like she's in a perpetual state of chaos. For the past 6 months, it's been just awful. And she's kind of at the point of feeling like she's failing to create a beautiful home life for her family. What would you say to that mom?
Interesting. My next book is about that very topic. It's called Overwhelmed Mom. And it addresses that very thing. I think sometimes we are quick to define ourselves as the overwhelmed mom, but an acute season of overwhelm is different than an overwhelming life. And I think sometimes we need to make those two distinctions. What I would say to that particular mom is, if you can create 10 to 15 minutes of what I would call a theme for the day, and it literally takes 10 to 15 minutes. If your whole day feels like it's spiraling, sometimes even just having 10 to 15 minutes of a win towards the end of the day, your kids are not going to remember the chaos that happened before it. What they are going to remember as they lay their little heads on the pillow is that 10 to 15 minutes of delight that you were able to offer in the midst of all that chaos. And so when my kids were little and I felt like I was in those, spirally days of chaos, I tried to have a theme to each of the days so that towards the end of the day, as it was winding down, we could return to that theme for like 10 minutes and reset. And it really did provide some intentional handholds to sort of ground the home. It made some unifying connective tissue in our family. I'll give you a couple of examples. So let's say on Monday, I decide every Monday we're going to take a penny walk. I don't know if you've ever taken a penny
what's
walk.
a penny walk?
You take your kids and you take a penny with you and you go to the end of the block and you say, I'm going to, you pick one of them, flip the penny. And if it's heads, we're going right. If it's tails, we're going left. And they each take turns. They flip the penny and you just walk that way for a block. And then you get to the end of that block, you hand the penny to somebody else and they get to flip the penny. And you always end up at a different destination, but you only do it for like 10 or 15 minutes and then you head home. So maybe that was Monday. We're going to take a penny walk. On Tuesday, maybe we're going to play a quick card game. And I had a box of cards, different card games, Goldfish or Go Fish, whatever it's called, Old Maid, whatever, when they were really little, in this little basket. And on Tuesday for 10 minutes, we're just going to play this quick game to reset. Maybe on Wednesday, we always have a cold smoothie on the porch together at the end of the day. And it's just a rhythm to our week that happens week in and week out, so that even if we're bristly and there's so much chaos and overwhelm, I can always afford 10 minutes in my day, always. And so I give my kids those 10 minutes of looking them in the eye and doing something intentional just for the sheer delight of delighting in them. That's what they will remember when they put their heads on the pillow.
I hear you saying connection and relationship like 1,000%. That's what you're saying when you're talking about these little moments. And especially with little kids, I mean, with all people, with all humans, we all need connection and we all need relationship. But with little kids, especially, giving them 15 minutes or 10 minutes of undivided attention can completely change the tone of your day.
Right.
It
now, is that
really
going to
does.
erase all the chaos and build new foundation for your day? No, you're still going to have the chaos, but life is chaotic. And sometimes chaos and overwhelm is unavoidable. There are certain circumstances that you just cannot orchestrate. No amount of IKEA paper planner organizational tool is going to reset certain chaotic, acute seasons of overwhelm. But in the midst of all of those chaotic things that are unchangeable about your life, you can change 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. You might not be able to control it all, but you can control 10 minutes of your day.
Out of curiosity, does Hygge ever address the concept of too much stuff?
Yes.
Physical stuff.
And what's so funny is if you go to Pinterest and you type in Hygge, everything comes up as you need a fireplace and you need candles and you need a stack of 5 books and you need a tray that has sugar and tea and a teapot and a cup and a candle and and you also have a fireplace and a window with snow outside. So if you don't have snow outside, it doesn't work.
This isn't working in Texas, guys.
Yeah.
No. Well, but what I'm saying is there's a lot of stuff in the picture, and I could look at that and go, oh my gosh, that it looks beautiful in the picture, right? But in my real life, if I had all that stuff, first of all, it would be a lot to get me to the point of being able to sit with all of that. But it just feels like that's a lot of stuff to have to deal with. So yeah.
Okay, there's 2 things in what you've just said, so we're going to split them in half.
Okay. 1,
the Pinterest or the Instagram photos that you're referring to are made by an American who's trying to Hygge her life, which does not reflect.
We're back to what we're talking about in the first half of the episode.
That's not a reflection of actual Hygge, because the Danish people they're often defined as minimalist. I'm going to push back on that and say that they're actually meaningfulists, but they are minimal in what they include in their spaces. When you actually, I would encourage you to Pinterest Danish homes and see what that looks like. You will see what often looks very sterile or uninviting to the untrained eye, but what it is it's clean lines. It's not empty spaces, but purposeful spaces. They often use a lot of wood accents, and they bring the outside in. So you'll probably see a lot of plants. They choose quality over quantity. So if they have a $400 budget to decorate a space, they're going to choose one large, expensive item versus, 20 little knickknacks from Target. So it is meaningful in that they select things for their space that matters to them, that doesn't just add like aesthetics on the wall, because remember, they're wanting to create an atmosphere with all five senses, not just what they see. So it, to the American eye, an actual Hygge space or Hygge home might seem very stark and barren. And so when you see those pictures on Pinterest, that's an American woman who's saying, oh, I want to create cozy in my home, because cozy is associated with hygge, but that's not necessarily what hygge is. Now, to your other point about like, oh, I see pictures of like snow outside and I live in Texas, or warm woolen blankets and a roaring fireplace, with mother sipping cocoa by the fire and all her little children, her little cherubs gathered around her knees. This stuff of like Thomas Kincaid paintings and Norman Rockwell books, that I will admit that winter is what we would call high hygge, because when we're thinking about cozy, we often think about being cocooned in something like a warm blanket and having that hot cocoa. That is high hygge. But hygge is a lifestyle. And so it has to then carry over to every season of living and every season of life. So even in the midst of summer, I can still hygge. Even living in Texas, where it feels like perpetual summer and one day of winter, you can still hygge. Hygge is about creating places, creating an atmosphere of contentment and rest and coziness. Can you do that in summer? Yes. How you do that is by really leaning in to the best parts of summer. I'm a big advocate, because I am a woman of faith, that God knew what he was doing with the seasons. There is a reason that we're not, eating ice cream cake in the middle of February. We eat it in June or July, right? Because our bodies need that reset. Seasons were God designed. There is something about the beginning and the ending of a season that sort of reorients us and helps us live right in our present moment and really capitalize on the greatness of that season. So when you're in Texas, you might not be setting out a hot cocoa bar in the middle of May like I could here in Minnesota, but you can set out like a lemonade stand or a lemonade bar for your guests. And that is living right here, right now, embracing the season that you are in and creating a cozy atmosphere for yourself and for others. It's about creating traditions and rhythms in your day that reflect the actual moment you're living, not the moment that you wish you were living.
Yeah, that's beautiful. The past week or two, I've really embraced making ice cream and doing something totally unexpected, like let's go swim at the pool from 5 to 7 and then come back and shower and go and hop straight into bed kind of thing. We would never do that normally, and it's been really fun to sort of surprise the kids and do these classical summer activities that are outside of our normal routine.
Sure. And I think that's part of embracing hygge, especially if you live in a place, if your environment is so strictly one way or another. So I'll use you in Texas and myself in Minnesota. You probably have 2 seconds of winter. I probably have 2 seconds of summer, right? So you want to fully enjoy the 2 seconds that you have, but also on the flip side of that, not disdain and regret and live in drudgery for the other, 98% of the year that you're stuck in this one season. For me, it's winter. So for me, there are certain traditions that I call my hygge traditions that I only reserve for wintertime, because I want to step into winter with delight, not drudgery. I don't want to step into it thinking, oh my word, I'm going to have 9 months of this. Brace myself, right?
That's probably my what I would do if I lived.
Right.
I hate
I mean,
winter.
that's natural. But I have learned to not just survive it, but really thrive in it, because there are certain things that I only allow myself to do, certain foods that I only allow myself to make, certain traditions and patterns and rhythms that I reserve for winter, so that I can look forward to it in anticipation, because those are all things that I enjoy. Something as simple as, I don't make soup, homemade soup, except as soon as like mid-fall through winter, because I want to enjoy it. I don't want to like, oh, we're having soup again. No, we get to have soup, And so I have even hobbies that I only do in certain seasons, so that I can step into them with delight and not drudgery. And you can do the same thing in summer. And if you look to them as, oh, this is my summer thing, you're kind of flipping the script. You're allowing that outward life to have a great effect on your inward life. So you can tell yourself, oh, we get to go down to the communal pool this month because it's now swimming season, because you're not going to do that in January.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I think I have one more question. Christine, do you have anything else you want to ask?
No, this has been wonderful.
Okay, Jamie, since you are, you have older kids, you've been through a lot more stages of motherhood than Christine and I have, and then a lot of our listeners have. What, if you could go back and give some advice to your younger self, at the beginning of your motherhood journey, at the beginning of your homeschool journey, what advice would you give yourself, or other moms that are at the beginning stages? What would you do differently if that's
I think those are two different things.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Are they two different questions?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I think so. Because
Can we ask both of them?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I have three answers. Can I have three answers?
Sure.
First of all, to the mom who's like, because what I hear you saying is like, oh, this is a mom who thinks they're not doing enough, or they're screwing up, or they're messing up, or like, what do I need to fix or change? If you are that mom sitting there thinking, I think I'm messing up, like, what's the right way? Give me the 5-step plan to grow a perfect human. If you are that mom, I would argue you're doing a pretty great job already, because if you are expelling any amount of energy and thought to wanting to do it right, it tells me that it matters to you, and you probably are pouring way more of yourself in than you even realize or want to give yourself credit for. If it didn't matter to you, you wouldn't even have thought of that. Oh, I think I'm not doing this right. The fact that even was a thought in your head tells me you're doing a pretty good job. And acknowledge that and give yourself that credit. As far as what I would say to the mom who's just starting out, either in their homeschooling journey or their parenting journey, always think with the end in mind. Like, think ahead 20 years from now. When I launch this child, what will success look like to me? Now, I'm not saying perfection, because they are a human being, and there are certain decisions that they will make and choices that they will choose that are beyond your ability to control. They are their own person. But what will success look like in their life? When you launch them, you will say, yes, I did that well. So whatever that answer is, you start with that over here. So here's a simple example of that. I knew early on, and your listeners might disagree with me, and that's totally fine. I'm not offended. I knew early on I did not want my 15-year-old wearing a string bikini to the beach. Right? So I'm not going to let my 2-year-old do it, because it might be cute to let a 2-year-old wear a bikini to the beach. It's not as cute to let your 15-year-old. And then therefore, when is the appropriate age to start shifting to that mentality? When is it not okay? When is it not appropriate? I don't know that there really is an answer for that. And so I wanted to start my parenting with how I wanted it to end. Now, you might argue that's kind of legalistic, and your 15-year-old should be able to choose to wear a bikini. It's kind of a benign example that I just chose to say, whatever you want your teens and your adult children someday to embrace, you have to embrace it now while they're little. So think with the end in mind. Here's a less benign example of that. When I looked ahead to what would define success, quote unquote success for me as a mother, I saw children who were kind and compassionate and honest and trustworthy, kids with character. And so to that end, as I was designing my homeschool curriculum and I was investing every day in their lives, that's what I had to focus on. Did I say math wasn't important? English wasn't important? No. But when push came to shove, character was more important to me than whether they got an A on that paper or not. So start with the end in mind and go from there. Now, what I would do differently, if I could rewind the tape or get a do-over, I would say I'd relax a little bit. I think in the early years of homeschooling, part of that was because I was a trained teacher in the classroom, and I came to homeschooling with a lot of educational baggage that has very little to do with real education that I had to slowly unmoor myself from and allow myself to see education for what it really was. And I eventually got there, but I wish I would have started with that.
Oh my gosh, I love all of that. I literally wrote it down as you were saying it.
Well, I hope this conversation has been just as encouraging to you as it has been for me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, I want to give you an opportunity to tell everybody where they can find you, find your books,
Sure.
When your next book comes out, all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, the easiest place to find me is jamieerickson.com, and that's where you can listen to both of my podcasts, the Holy Hygge podcast and the Mom to Mom podcast. Both are kind of living in perpetuity on the internet, and find my blog. And my next book does come out August 5th, 2025.
Okay. So this will probably be out around then. So great.
So and you can find that wherever books are sold. It's from Moody Publishers. It's called
Awesome.
Overwhelmed Mom, Quiet the Chaos, Mind What Matters, and Enjoy Your Life Again.
Oh, that title is a fabulous title. That's
Pre-order
really
check.
I know, right?
Okay. And then did you mention you have 3 books, right?
Yes. My first book was Homeschool Bravely, and then I have Holy Hygge, and now Overwhelmed Mom.
Okay.
Excellent.
Are you on social media at all aside from the website?
You can find me on Instagram. That's, I think, the most fun place to find me. And I'm unlikely_homeschool. And then you also can find me on Facebook. And I do run a Kidlit vetting site where I sort of pre-read Kidlit all the way up through middle grade fiction to like young YA for moms who maybe want to be really intentional with the books that their kids are reading, but maybe don't have the time to pre-read everything. So that is just a place where I hang out and give reading suggestions as well as book reviews for moms who are curious about what might be in certain titles that their kids are choosing.
Where did you say that was again? Yeah, repeat that. The website or whatever that is again.
It's Bibliofiles, so it's BIBLIO -FILES. And you can find that on my website, jamieerickson.com. It is a community of moms. And so we also have a Facebook group where we discuss and sort of crowdsource good titles based on the interests of our kids.
Oh, excellent. That's a great resource.
I was about to say, score.
Okay, wait. So along those lines, could you tell us what your favorite books have been to read with your kids or to your kids, kind of in the broader, like, elementary school, middle school, high school?
Sure. I'm always a firm believer that the cream rises to the top. So at the end of these last 17 years, I can look back and think of 2 books that I continue to return to because they brought such delight for my kids and therefore nurtured great family memories and really a family language. Like we still quote from these books because they were so deeply entrenched in our lives at that time. The first one is Sarah Plain and Tall. I think I have read that every single year to my children for the last 17 years. And I realize all of them are way too old to hear that anymore, but they will still hear it because I will still be reading it. So that one, and also the very first book of the Penderwick series. I think
I love that book.
I think it just came to us, and it's interesting that it's about 4 girls, and I have one daughter but 4 sons, and I was kind of hesitant the first time I read it aloud, thinking, is this going to fall flat because these boys might not like, reading a book solely about girls. It's such a
There's a boy in it.
There is a boy, so that does count. But, there's something universal about the personalities of each one of those girls, where my boys could see themselves in all of their personalities. It really touched on a lot of very universal themes that happen in every family. And even though there were some bumps, the siblings squabble, as all siblings do, it was real and honest. And yet, at the end of the book, those sibling connections were firm, and a lot happened in the book, but it all came back to what matters most are my sisters and my family. And I think that book came to us at a time in our lives where we just really needed to be reminded of the value of siblings and sibling connections. We read it in the summer, which is perfect because it's a great summer read. It was just like, everything aligned to make that such a great experience. I'm not saying it's the most well-written book and the best book, but I think sometimes the very best books and the most memorable books for a family are the ones that are just really uniquely connected to that family and that particular moment that it's read aloud. And I would say that's the case with the Penderwicks.
I actually have that feeling about Watership Down.
Oh, I have some strong feelings about that book too.
Yeah, that's an interesting one for sure. But I have a lot of memories of my mom reading that book to us.
Yeah.
Lots of fond memories. So
I read that with my middle son when I was leading a teen book club with him and his friends.
Okay.
And we had such great conversations in our book club about that book.
Yeah.
Strong feelings. Teenagers have strong feelings about what they're reading, and they unleashed a torrent of words on me about that book, whether good or bad.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
All right. Well, I think we are at our time limit. Thank you so much for joining us, Jamie. I really appreciate your time.
This has been a joy. What a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, mamas, we are done here for the day. You can connect with Christine over at Nourish the Littles. You can connect with me over at For Nutrient's Sake. You can connect with the podcast on at Modern Ancestral Mamas. You can listen to it wherever you get podcasts. You can now watch it on YouTube. And please take time to leave a review or a like or a subscribe or any of those things. Share it wherever you can, even if that's just texting it to your friend. All those things really help the show grow and help other people to see it and listen to it and get the conversations
flowing.
And what?
Get the conversations flowing.
All right. That is all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time. Bye, y'all.